Well,
think he's got the message?
Well, I think we probably have seen the last of him. And, there was this big hoo-ha over this breach of protocol. You don't step in front of the Queen. She just looked utterly bemused by it. This is just, well, it's a wake-up call, isn't it? This is a real reality check for her.
Hello and welcome to The Sun's Royal Exclusive Show. I'm Brontë Coy, news.com.au's royal reporter, filling in this week for your usual host, The Sun's royal editor, Matt Wilkinson. I am delighted to have with me here in studio Vanity Fair's royal correspondent, Katie Nicholl. Thanks for being here, Katie.
Thank you for having me.
One royal we haven't spoken about for a few weeks, and I want to address that quickly, is Prince Andrew. After the scandals of last month, he's been largely out of the limelight. Do you think that we've seen the last of him in public life, or do you think, he's got the message?
Well, I think we probably have seen the last of him in terms of public life, certainly in terms of carrying out any duties on behalf of the royal family.
I felt like he was pictured a bit more visibly with the royal family over the last year or so. I felt like he was just a little bit more front and centre.
Well, he was, but you're right, Brontë, because he was very much centre at the memorial for King Constantine of Greece, and that had such a backlash in the media. And of course, this was when the king wasn't well and the princess was out of the picture, and it sort of looked as if the Duke of York seized upon that moment to sort of re-establish his authority as a family figure. I think his absence at Christmas was important, and as you say, hasn't been seen much since then. I think we'll probably see occasional pictures of him out riding in Windsor, but I think there is a feeling that he just needs to be kept at a distance to protect the reputation of the monarchy, both here in the UK, but, further overseas internationally as well.
Well, the big news this week, of course, has been the launch of Donald Trump's second US presidency. To cross over into local politics for a second, it's no secret that Keir Starmer and Mr Trump are quite different. But I want to talk about how the royal family fits into all of this. The King sent a personal note to Mr Trump this week. What do we know about that and what their relationship is like?
Well, as you say, it was a personal note. It was a private note, so we don't know the contents of the letter, but we know that the King is an avid letter writer. Well, in fact, Melania Trump revealed in her memoir that she and Trump keep in touch regularly with the King via letter writing. Yeah. So I think no surprise that he would have written a letter of congratulations, and I'm sure that sort of special relationship between the UK and the US will have been something played up. And I think, what's so interesting about Trump's inauguration is that while Farage was there and Boris Johnson was there, Keir Starmer wasn't there. And Downing Street were asked, well, is this an embarrassment? You've got the leader of Britain not invited to the inauguration. And they said, no, it's not a point of embarrassment at all. But actually, it sort of doesn't put Keir Starmer as a big power player up there. Now, that said, no member of the royal family was there either. But I think what the royals do in this sort of power players, they act very much as soft power diplomats. They're able to do something that politicians aren't. And I think, that special relationship between the US and the UK largely depends on the president's relationship with the royal family. And we know with Trump that it is a really special relationship. He's very fond, he's an Anglophile, but he's a monarchist as well.
And the question does get asked a lot, usually by Republican groups, but it's what is the role of the royal family in a modern society? And you've touched on it there. It's, on the one hand, we have the charities and the philanthropic work, and on the other hand, though, it's the power they can wield in situations where there is huge change in the world. I suppose they're a constant.
Well, I mean, their role is to be head of state, but not political. So, they can't get involved in politics, but I think that does enable them to have a different relationship with other world leaders. And I think when you look at King Charles particularly, he's been very, very successful at that. And of course, this had led to a lot of speculation as to whether there's going to be a tour, either, the King visiting America or Trump coming over here for a state visit. And the palace is saying there's nothing in the diary yet. I mean, these tours take a long time to plan. And of course, the president's a busy man and the King is a busy man. And with sort of 6 months of planning going into any tour, I think it's probably unlikely for this year, but I think there's every chance that we can see Trump back over here in Britain for a tour next year. And of course, if that happens, the red carpet at Buckingham Palace will very firmly be rolled out for him.
As you said earlier, he's a monarchist, so we know he loves the pomp and pageantry, and who wouldn't? Do you think that's likely to be how it goes then, that he comes here as opposed to them travelling to the US?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very likely that he'll come over here. I think possibly we could see the Prince and Princess of Wales go over to the States. They've been there before. They've always been very, very well received. But yes, I think I probably would put my money on the fact that it'll be Trump coming over here. I mean, the King's got he's got overseas tours coming up this year. I mean, there's some big realms that he needs to visit. Of course, he did Australia last year, but Canada's, well, Canada's having an election this year, so he can't go this year. I'd expect him to go to Canada next year, and that might pave the way for a visit to North America. We'll have to wait and see, but I think there has been speculation as to whether it will happen this year. I think that's probably a little premature, but it will happen, absolutely.
And of course, bearing in mind that the election only happened in November. So as you say, there's a lot of lead time to plan that. And I understand you covered actually Mr. Trump's last visit to the UK, which was with the late Queen.
Yes, that was back in 2018 when he visited Windsor Castle.
So what did you see on that visit? What was your impression of his relationship with the royals back then from first-hand experience?
Well, he looked very, very proud to be there. Delighted to be in the company of the Queen. He is a monarchist. He's very, very fond of the late Queen. I suppose the most memorable moment, and I was broadcasting, I think, for the BBC at the time, was when they were doing the inspection of the Guard of Honour, and Trump went and moved directly in front of the Queen and sort of blocked her and, of course, dwarfed her because he's so tall and she was so tiny. And, there was this big hoo-ha over this breach of protocol. You don't step in front of the Queen. Of course, you don't. You don't want to touch the Queen either. She just looked utterly bemused by it. And, in fact, I remember speaking to the Queen's late cousin, Lady Elizabeth Anson, for my book, The New Royals. And I asked her about that meeting with the Queen because we all wanted to know, what did the Queen make of Trump? It wasn't quite clear how it had gone down. And of course, she'd entertained him back at Windsor Castle. There was that wonderful photograph of the Queen with Melania and Donald Trump and the dog food bowls being in the picture. And you think, well, this is domesticity at Windsor Castle. And Lady Anson said to me that she thoroughly enjoyed meeting Trump, that she found him to be something of an enigma. So I think, there were points where perhaps she was bemused by Trump, and I suspect many people who have met Trump would say the same thing.
Quite a compliment from the late Queen to call someone else an enigma.
Absolutely. And I think she, the late Queen enjoyed meeting all sorts of different people, and I think would have enjoyed meeting Trump. Might have been slightly perplexed as to why he'd walked directly in front of her while he was inspecting her parade, but that was Trump.
Moving on, I'd love to talk now about the Prince and Princess of Wales, because it has been such a positive start to the year for them. Catherine, yes, Catherine, I do read the comments and I thank you for the reminders. We recently heard she's in remission and the future is looking so bright. What do you think we're going to see from her next?
Well, I think, it was wonderful to see her at the Royal Marsden. I think it was deeply significant that she chose going to the place where we now know she was treated for her own cancer to mark that first official solo engagement. The first in over a year. Yeah. So it was poignant, it was obviously important, and it was very personal. And I think what we're seeing her do is use that unique spotlight that she has to put it on a really important cause. I mean, cancer will affect 1 in 2 of us. And I think the Royals have done great work in a very short space of time in terms of breaking down the stigma that I think is still attached to this disease. Both the King and Princess Catherine have gone through their own cancer journeys in the past 12 months. So to see her doing this work was wonderful. I was really moved by it. She looked so well. She was really radiant. I mean, there was a wonderful photograph taken by Chris Jackson when she arrived at the hospital, and you could see her looking up at the sign. And you've got the reflection of the Royal Marsden in that photograph. And you can see, this was a place that she went to not knowing how it was going to fare for her, knowing how she was going to respond to the treatment, if she was going to be all right. And you could see that look in her face. And, I think it was a very brave... I think what she's done has been very brave to speak about it so publicly, to go back to the Royal Marsden, which she obviously wanted to do, to thank the people who'd taken care of her, to go and speak to people who are going through the treatment, which she's gone through herself. It's been, in many ways, a great leveller. So I think we can expect to see her do more of the work within this field. Of course, the Prince of Wales is back to work. It's been a busy start to the new year for him. We know he's going to be at the anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz next week. We won't see the Princess of Wales at that, but I think we will see her at important moments. I mean, this is going to be a big year for the royal family, and I think she's going to cherry pick quite carefully the engagements that she wants to be at, she will have a new perspective on life now. Her priority is her children, always has been, it's always come before anything else, and her health. And those things will come first before anything else. But she is incredibly dutiful. She's absolutely dedicated to the job. There was a lot of speculation last year that she may not come back into the role in the same way, that she may not be doing as much. I think she will resume full-time royal duties, but you have to remember it's only been a year. She's still in the very early stages of her remission, and we need her. That's what I think the past 12 months have shown us. So we need to give her that time and space to make a full recovery. And so let's just be patient, manage expectations.
You're absolutely right. I suppose, because obviously we talk about the royal topics pretty much every day. It feels like it's been a while, but the reality is she only let us know that she'd finished chemotherapy in September. So really it has only been a couple of months since she's been back. And I know that we're all just impatient because people love her and she's missed when she's not out on the royal engagement.
She is, and I think the point is that when we do see her out, it's really going to sort of concentrate that spotlight. She did a lot of running up and down the country, juggling that with the 3 children, doing the overseas tours. I think people would be quite surprised to learn just how hands-on William and Catherine are as parents. And I think, this is just, it's a wake-up call, isn't it? This is a real reality check for her. And so I think it's a case of what Kensington Palace are describing as a very gradual return to work that's very much on her terms. And I think that's how it should be.
What about the BAFTAs? I know it's a much lighter note, but I love seeing Catherine at the BAFTAs when she hits the red carpet, and that's on next month. So do you think there's a chance we'll see her?
Listen, I think there's a chance. Of course, it's the Prince of Wales who's the patron of BAFTA. It's his thing. But as you say, Brontë, she always lights up that red carpet, doesn't she, when she attends?
Oh, yes.
And, it would be wonderful to see her at something like that. It's possible, but I think it's more likely that we're going to see her sort of really use that energy and focus her efforts on her early years, that sort of work within that field of what she's doing, and in both research, in visits. And remember last year, that was going to be a big year for the early years, and a lot of that had to go on the back burner. So I think, yes, we might see her at the BAFTAs and looking wonderful in a dress, but I think her focus is going to want to be really picking up where she left off last year and not able to complete a lot of what she wanted to do. And I think there's every chance that we might see a tour. That would be wonderful if we did, if she's well enough to do that. I don't think it's going to be anything long haul, but, there's every chance they might be able to do a short haul tour. And I think, we've seen with the King how important that visibility is.
Yes.
When he gets out, when he's doing those things, it gives us here and around the world the reassurance that the monarchy is in safe hands, and that the King as well, and that those he refers to as his substitutes, I suppose, are also well in supporting him.
Absolutely, and we will talk about his substitutes and the people that are supporting the King and the Waleses in the royal family shortly. But to stay on the Princess of Wales for a moment, it's been reported recently that she will be the first Princess of Wales. I should say it's been speculated, not confirmed yet, but that she may be the first Princess of Wales in decades to be able to grant royal warrants. What do we think this says about her position in the royal family now?
Well, I was quite surprised to discover that the late Princess of Wales, Diana, didn't give royal warrants. It's always been the Prince of Wales and the monarch. So I think, this does open up the whole modernising of the monarchy. She's a woman, of course, giving her the right to do that, but also giving her that breadth within her role as the Princess of Wales, I think really just shows how important that title is, how weighty it is. And it'll be very interesting if she's given that privilege of awarding royal warrants. Who will she give them to? I would imagine that, a designer like Alexander McQueen, who she's become so synonymous with. Of course, Sarah Burton designed her wedding dress. She's been dressed by Sarah Burton at McQueen for so many important occasions. I would imagine brands like that, brands like Holland Cooper, who she loves, will be, probably high up on that list of, that short list of who to give the royal warrant to.
Probably some very excited designers in Mayfair at the moment, wondering if they'll have one bestowed upon them. So to move over to Prince William, there's also been a lot of reports and speculation lately about some ideas that he's potentially mulling over for whenever his time as king comes around. And one of them, unsurprisingly, I think though, is about the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh and about elevating their position, but also potentially bringing in their children, Lady Louise and James Earl of Wessex, and giving them working royal roles. What's your take? Obviously, it's not confirmed. This is just, this has been speculated, but what's your take on that idea?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because when you look at Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie, they've been very much encouraged to go and live independent lives of the royal family, to earn their own living, not to be dependent on taxpayer-funded security, not to be a drain, I suppose, on the public purse. So it would be a step in a different direction. And I think, possibly it is being looked at. I mean, Princess Beatrice was there on Christmas Day. That was a sort of very visible presence for her. They're sort of welcoming her back into the royal fold. I know that both Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie are keen to do some royal work around their jobs and their home lives. And one wonders if perhaps that's a template that might work for Viscount Severn and Lady Louise Windsor. Because I think there's had to be a rethink at the palace, because the shape of the royal family, the dynamic of the royal family has changed. We don't have Harry and Meghan over here, who would have been doing so much of the work. Yes, the Duke of York has been ostracised and stripped of his royal duties. We've got Princess Anne, who's about to turn 75, but still carrying out hundreds of engagements a year. We've got the Edinburghs, we've got the Waleses, but, with the princess having gone through her own health journey, her workload has been reduced over the past year. So there's got to be contingency planning in place. There's got to be a plan B of well, we may have to look at something different. I think the King's whole idea of a slimmed down monarchy is something that is having to be redressed because of circumstance within the royal family.
I was about to say, I remember that was talked about for years prior to the late Queen's death. And you could understand why it was being spoken about then in the eyes of modern society, what the taxpayer is funding. But as you say, things have changed so dramatically for the royal family in recent years. It makes sense, I suppose, that we may see some new approaches in the future.
Yes, and I think there is a way of doing it, and it wouldn't necessarily have to be the case that Lady Louise and Viscount Severn would have to be full-time working royals. I think there's a compromise here. She's at university, he's at boarding school. They're clearly going to go on their own trajectories. I think when you look at Sophie and Edward, they're so down to earth in so many ways. They've shielded those children very deliberately from the spotlight, thrusting them into a life of royal duty. I don't think it's on the agenda, but I don't think it's completely a wild idea that they might be called upon on occasions, where appropriate, to support the monarchy.
Yeah, particularly because, as I understand, Lady Louise turned down the opportunity herself to have the HRH title. It's expected that her brother may do the same, but we'll see. I suppose anything could happen under a new reign. We're not sure. But speaking of Prince William still and what that might look like in the future, he's proven quite deft at sort of balancing the progressive issues but with the traditions of royalty and the monarchy. How do you think that all looks when he becomes king? Do you think there'll be any other big changes on the horizon, or will he be more likely to stick with what's in place?
Well, I think, when it comes to William, he recognises the importance of the past, of tradition, of pomp, of pageantry, of ceremony. That runs through his DNA. He believes absolutely in the monarchy. He's determined that it's not going to fizzle out with him, that he will have his reign, and then George will have his reign, and in it will continue after that. But I think he will bring his own touch to it. I think we've seen him do that in his role as the Prince of Wales. I mean, if you just an example is how he is developing social housing within the Duchy of Cornwall estate, for the first time. That's something that he's doing that's novel, that's groundbreaking, and that is important to him. So I think, in the same way that he's putting his own stamp, his own mark on being the Prince of Wales, he will also do that when his time comes to be king. So he's going to be a modern king, and he will do things differently to his father. Of course he will, in the same way that he is as Prince of Wales. But I think the foundation upon which the monarchy sits and depends won't change too much. I think that's been key to Charles's reign, and I think William knows it will be key to his reign when that time comes too.
Because the king is obviously also quite progressive on a lot of issues, environmentalism and climate change being a major one. But we've got to wish the Duchess of Edinburgh a very happy birthday. She turned 60 this week. And as you mentioned earlier, what a star player she has become in the royal family. So we know a lot about the Duchess, having had her in public life for so long, but, you know, you've been on the royal beat for so long. What's your impression of Sophie? What do you know about her?
Well, I think she's remarkably down to earth. I mean, we were talking earlier about how she's raised her children, you know, without royal titles, away from the media spotlight. And she was always a great favourite of the late Queen, who saw her not really as a daughter-in-law, but as a second daughter. She used to call her Mama. Sophie used to call the Queen Mama. They were incredibly close. And I think, you know, the one thing that you see with Sophie is her loyalty and her duty and her absolute commitment to the crown. You know, when the late Duke of Edinburgh died, she was there very much for the Queen as a rock for her. When Charles succeeded the Queen to the throne, she was very supportive of the King. And you know, when he had to take some time out from royal duties, she was asked to represent him. And I think, you know, she didn't take that title on, the Duchess of Edinburgh, lightly. It's a title that won't continue through to her children. That title will move from her to Princess Charlotte. And of course, Edward as Duke of Edinburgh. These are weighty titles. They take them very seriously. And I think we've seen in the last couple of years someone who is incredibly hardworking, who puts the spotlight on perhaps issues that we wouldn't normally associate with the royals, you know, women who are victims of war and sexual abuse and rape and difficult subjects that the Duchess has really gone to highlight. You know, she's been to Ukraine, she's been to some war-torn areas, she's done some really controversial work. You know, she's on a mission to sort of improve vision around the world, particularly in poor countries in Africa, largely because her daughter suffered a vision impairment when she was younger. So she really takes on important causes and important work. And I think she does so without necessarily wanting to be celebrated for it, without wanting the recognition. She does it because she's got that platform and she wants to put the spotlight on work that's important to her. And I think she's very amiable. She's always, every time I've been on an engagement with her, she's very, very friendly. She's a joy to be around. And I think, as you saw from that picture of her, you know, she looks wonderful at 60. She's incredibly photogenic, and there's a sense, I think, that she's really come into her own.
Whenever I speak to people that have been on engagements with her as well, it's always the same thing, that she's a very popular royal among people that work in that environment. She seems to be a lovely person. So a very happy birthday to the Duchess of Edinburgh. We're going to finish up now with some quick-fire questions, and we are going to stay on Sophie. It was her birthday this week, as we've discussed. If you had been invited to her party, what would you have taken her as a gift?
I would have taken her a tennis racket, because I know that her and Edward love to play real tennis together.
Oh, real tennis. Oh, that's fun. That's a good one. And shows you know her, a very good personal gift. Still on birthdays, which royals party would you most like to attend?
Well, it's Princess Anne's 75th. I think I mentioned that earlier. This year, I sat down and interviewed her for her 70th birthday for Vanity Fair. And I'd love the chance to sit down with her again. She was quite formidable as an interviewee, and I think, you know, she's got such a unique perspective on the whole of the royal family. She's seen it evolve and change over the decades, and I think with her lifetime of experience, yeah, I'd like to go to her birthday party.
She'd have some good stories, yeah. So William recently popped up in a Wetherspoons for a pint. What's the most unexpected place you've seen a royal turn up?
Oh gosh,
like on tours, occasionally they just show up.
Well, yeah, I mean, we didn't bump into them, but we ended up in a bar in the hotel with William and Catherine on one of our tours. That's many years back in when we were in India and Bhutan. So it's not that uncommon to see him at a bar.
Oh, he sounds like fun. We're well into 2025 now. What royal story would you love to see unfold this year?
Do you know what? I'd love to see the Prince and Princess of Wales carry out a mini tour, whether that's here in the UK or something a little further afield. I think it would be really fantastic. So let's hope that might be on the horizon.
I think a lot of people would agree with that sentiment. Thank you so much, Katie. As always, absolutely fascinating to chat with you.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe and leave us a comment. We do read them. See you again next week.